Support for Connecticut East this week comes from SCAD, the Southeastern Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence, is offering a $3,500 sign-on bonus for licensed clinicians. Go to licensedclinicians.org to learn more. That's licensedclinicians.org. And Media Here and Now, a full-service content creation agency producing video, audio, podcasts, and digital content for social media, online and broadcast use for all types of businesses, organizations, and non-profits. Find out more at mediahereandnow.com. It's the only public liberal arts university in the state, and it's right here in Eastern Connecticut. We sit down with Eastern Connecticut State University's new president, Karim Ismaili, as he celebrates 3 months in office. Plus, we take a look at other stories making the headlines from around the region. This is Connecticut East This Week. Hello, I'm Brian Scott Smith. Connecticut has many great educational institutions and, of course, is home to one of the most famous in the world, Yale University. But Eastern Connecticut also has bragging rights on having its own famous schools, being the home of UConn and having the only public liberal arts university in the state in the shape of Eastern Connecticut State University in the town of Willimantic. Just recently, the school had a change in leadership, and now it's been 3 months since the new president has been in office at Eastern, and here's our exclusive interview with him. Joining us on Connecticut East this week is the 7th president of Eastern Connecticut State University. I'm going to use your full title, even though just before we started this, you said, please, it's just Karim. It is Dr. Karim Ismaili, president of Eastern Connecticut State University. Welcome, sir, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Brian. I appreciate the opportunity.
So tell us, as we say, only the 7th president. They hold on for a long time here, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later. You have an amazing background yourself, obviously, in education, 3 decades over various organizations, not only here in the US, but Canada and in other parts of the world as well. It's the obvious question. Why did you want to come and be the president of the only liberal arts university in the state of Connecticut?
In the question is part of the answer. Being the only designated public liberal arts university in the state means that it has a distinctive identity, an identity that I value. And I will tell you that when the position description came out and I reviewed it, I found that the history of the institution, its beginnings as a teacher education institution in 1889, up until today, it's an institution that's adapted to the challenges, to the opportunities that have been foisted upon it. And I wanted to be essentially someone who was considered for the position. I also will tell you, Brian, that there's something personal about this, in that my mentor, President Emeritus Dana Molifaria, who was at Bridgewater State University, his mentor was David Carter, a former president of this institution. And Dana encouraged me to really look at this institution, and he said, and I quote, "I see you there." And now his mentee is the place where he was mentored, President David Carter.
The search for a president is a big deal. It takes a while. Just talk to us a little bit about that process.
There is a prospectus that comes out, which is essentially a description of the university. Usually that description is the result of a lot of conversations that have occurred on campus. That's usually about a 20 to 25 page document. As a candidate, you review that document and you consider whether you want to move forward. At that point, you develop a letter of application, you put all your experiences in a resume or a curriculum vitae, and you send that in, and you hope that you'll be one of the individuals that is going to be selected for a preliminary interview. As you're doing that, you're learning about the institution. The letter that I wrote really situated my experience to where I felt Eastern was, is now, and could be in the future. I had a great opening interview, was selected to be a finalist, and I was among a small number of finalists that was interviewed at the Connecticut State University College System office in Hartford, and I met with various representatives of different constituencies, both internal and external to the university. I had a really long, very interesting dinner with the Chancellor, Chancellor Cheng, for about 2.5 hours, and 2 weeks later, I was offered the position, and I was thrilled.
I was going to ask you that question. You've preempted me. Despite all of your years of professional education and all of the jobs that you've held and, as I say, in other prestigious organizations, was it still exciting to be told we would like you to be our new president?
Oh, yes. When I was informed that I was going to get a call, I was excited. I was with my wife, my butterflies were in my stomach, and the conversation was very sort of congenial at the outset. And I was like, get to the point, please, Chancellor. And when he said, that we'd like to move your application forward as the selected candidate, I was thrilled because I had the opportunity to learn about the institution. As I mentioned, Brian, I had met a number of really devoted and dedicated individuals from the campus, from external groups that had a love for this campus, and I wanted to be part of the community. I think that's the issue that really struck me, was that I wanted to be part of a place where people feel so connected to the mission, to the role that this institution plays in the region and in the state. Most importantly, it was a student-first campus. Everyone here is focused on students and their success.
Let's talk a little bit about your history before we start talking more about your presidency and obviously your vision for Eastern as you move it forward. You are a child of 3 citizenships.
I am.
Talk to us a little bit about that, because people will not be able to detect, because you have lost it completely, where you were born.
Yes.
And it's the country that I come from.
Yes, that's right. So I was born in South London in a neighborhood called Streatham, and I grew up in the 1970s in London. It was a bit of a challenging time because, there was a bit of racial strife. There were a lot of economic challenges that the country was facing. And so what I would say is that I still have a deep affinity and connection to my place of birth. When I was a teenager, so 13, my family, because of personal circumstances, we had to move to Canada, and that was for our own safety. My mother and father divorced, and my father was abusive, and so we were advised to basically leave the country. We had relatives in Canada, so we ended up moving to Vancouver overnight, literally. And I went to school in Canada, in Vancouver, beautiful city. My mother, she's now a single mother. I have a younger brother. She worked multiple jobs, but her whole sense of self and what she wanted for us was to be educated. And so I finished my education, but I ended up studying in Canada, in the UK, finishing my PhD. And then when I finished my doctoral degree, I was very much interested in teaching at a higher education institution. That's when my journey started in the United States. There was a small university called Radford University in southwestern Virginia that took a chance on this Brit turned Canadian and moved to Virginia, then moved to New York, where I met my wife. And I've basically been in the U.S. ever since, with the exception of a 4-year hiatus where I worked in Toronto at what is now Toronto Metropolitan University. So I will say that each of the countries that I have citizenship with mean a great deal for me for many different reasons.
I think I read somewhere that originally you wanted to be a police officer.
I did. When I was about to graduate with my undergraduate degree in criminology, my intention was to become a police officer, the RCMP. There was a professor, his name was Dr. Azat Fatah, who's 95 years old, and I've been in touch with him. He's such a great man and still so engaged in his discipline. He suggested to me that I consider graduate school. And honestly, Brian, I didn't know what graduate school was. It wasn't in my orbit. It wasn't something I'd thought about. So I ended up applying to a number of institutions, some of which I never would have dreamed that I would be able to get into, but I realized that his reference and his reputation enabled me to get to the University of Cambridge, where I did my master's degree. And so that led me on my sort of more academic journey, where I learned the love of research and the joys of sort of being a scholar and being able then to fall in love with teaching and being able to combine those things. And so that's what I love, and that's why being in higher education for me is just something that is in my blood. I feel like it's just who I am.
I think some of the other stuff that is just great about your backstory, having done obviously the research and, for this interview, a lovely story about the studying of criminology at Simon Fraser University. You worked the graveyard shift at 7-Eleven and was connected to a scholarship that covered 80% of your tuition. These types of stories are the ones that really resonate with many of the students that come to Eastern.
Absolutely. Many of our students in regional public universities like Eastern, they're students who they might be first in their family to go to college. They may have limited financial means. So anything that we can provide as a society to help those students realize their dreams is where my heart rests and what I've experienced. And I know that for our community, it's the same. So if I didn't have that scholarship from 7-Eleven while I was working graveyard shift, I'm not sure I would have finished my degree. And I've been in touch with them, and they love my story because for them, they see the tangible impact that those funds that maybe were small from their perspective have made such a big difference in my life.
Absolutely. So let's get on to the fact that July 31st, 2024, you started as president of Eastern. So it's only 3 months that we're now talking to you. So not a lot of time, but a lot has happened in that period. And as we said earlier, the previous president, Dr. Elson Nunez, 18 years as president. Before that, you mentioned this gentleman, the late David Carter, also 18-year president of Eastern. Did you get any advice from Dr. Nunez? Because, after 18 years at an institution and what she did for Eastern, I'm sure she had plenty that she wanted to pass on, didn't she?
President Nunez was so gracious, so welcoming. I remember that my wife and I came to campus, this was in May, and we were having lunch, and she was talking about the values of the institution, the ethos of the institution. But she had deep humility. She never once said that this was what my presidency was about. She always talked about the community and the way in which this community embraces its mission. And through those conversations with her, she never advised me, but I listened to every word she said because there were many gems. For example, recognizing and being very cognizant of the role that the institution plays in the region, in Windham, but also in the state, and how we draw students from all across the state of Connecticut, outside of the state, from other countries, and the obligation we have to serve every student as effectively as we possibly can, but also to know what students are motivated here for. Get to know your students. And obviously that resonates with me, but to hear it from a leader who was so enthusiastic about it 18 years as she was on her way out was incredible to see. And like I said, for me, the honor of being the successor to President Carter, President Nunez, honestly, Brian, I feel that I'm so fortunate. And there are days when I think, am I really capable of living up to those expectations? But I know that the community here is so supportive, and they know that I'm in here 100% to work for the benefit of Eastern.
As we say, 3 months in, you certainly have hit the ground running. Eastern welcomes this year its largest class in years since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, which says obviously a lot about the previous president and, the reputation that Eastern's got, but also sets you up for success. Talk to us about that, because that must be a big deal to see those numbers come rolling in to the point that you even had to open up halls of residence that hadn't been used for a while. I mean, that's huge.
That's correct. We lead the state university system in terms of new students that have enrolled. And you're right. I credit President Nunez, her leadership, and also the team that she built in our admissions office. But I also feel that there's a kind of an institutional focus on making sure that as we go through some demographic challenges in New England, where there's a reduction in the number of high school graduates, we're going to have to be creative and innovative. And so I think a lot of that came to fruition through this enrollment cycle. I think the challenge for us, Brian, is now to make sure that our very strong retention rates, making sure that students stay at Eastern through their entire degree program, that's a challenge for me as the president of Eastern, but all of us to collectively work to addressing, and then making sure that we don't take our foot off the gas, but that we're equally prepared for what we hope will be another strong new class for next academic year. But as you mentioned, we also have to be organizationally prepared for making sure that we have the classes that larger class needs, that we have the residence experience that all of those students need, and the support services and the other opportunities that those students need. So it is a full-on institutional effort, but we've risen to the occasion. And like I say, for me, 90 days in, 3 months in, it's been incredible to see how everyone is connected to this large larger mission where we know that every student gives us an opportunity to transform a life.
Brand, reputation, big things, doesn't matter whether you're an educational institution or you're up like a high street sneaker or something like that. I mean, these are important things. And certainly Eastern's brand and its reputation has continued to grow. One of the things is obviously visibility as well outside of the college and school environment. Next year, Eastern will be in an episode of what's called the College Tour, which is a long-running series which looks at colleges and schools. What does that mean to you to, again, have that come up so quickly? You will be part of it as well. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so one of the initial decisions I made was whether we should move forward with the College Tour. And when I learned about it and when I viewed the previous episodes on Amazon Prime, it became abundantly clear to me that this is a wonderful showcase, way to showcase everything that Eastern provides, everything that the other institutions that are profiled on that series provides. It's also a real way to bolster spirit on a campus when you have individuals, film crews on campus, interviewers, personalities who are coming to your campus and honestly praising it, talking about how incredible a campus it is. It's both a reminder of what Eastern is, but it's also a very public affirmation of that. For me, the College Tour is also an opportunity to present ourselves in a way that is authentic about Eastern. All of the students that were engaged wanted to be engaged. All of the different faculty and classroom experiences and lab experiences and other kinds of sporting events, and we could go across the entire university, artistic events, all of those things that were showcased is real. It's exactly what Eastern is. And 3 months in, this is what I continue to be amazed at, is just how vibrant this community is. So if we can use the College Tour as a way to project that, why not?
The other thing before we started recording the interview, you were saying that you're in the middle, maybe getting towards the end of what you're calling a listening and learning tour. Talk to us about that, why it's important and who you've been obviously interacting, because there's various audiences that form part of this.
There are, yes. So one of the things that I have embarked on is this listening and learning tour. We are very intentionally bringing all of the different constituencies that engage with Eastern to answer a series of questions that really are about our mission, our designation as the public liberal arts institution of Connecticut, to think about our opportunities, our challenges, what we do well, maybe what we can do better. But it's an optimistic, positive opportunity for a cross-section of individuals across different constituencies to get together. So I'm not meeting with individual departments. We're very intentional about having a very broad cross-section of people come to a room. Actually, it's this room that we're sitting in, the Connecticut room at Eastern, and we just have a conversation. And what I'm learning is exactly what I had hoped, which is that there's a very strong commitment and dedication to the university. But I'm also learning about the ideas that individuals have, how they're forward-thinking, how there's a commitment to innovation, but also really a focus on how we can even enhance our support for students.
The legislators, of course, it's always an important thing to make sure that they understand why Eastern, amongst all the other sort of like educational institutions in this state, needs to continue to be recognised, supported. Money, of course, is always an issue with education. Talk to us about that, because it's hit the headlines, not necessarily Eastern, but, you know, the funding for education has hit the headlines of late.
Yes, well, public funding for higher education, public higher education is really one of our most important vehicles through which we're able to execute our mission. And what we want to do is make sure that as costs go up, I mentioned that's not just about inflation, but it's also about the range of support services that students should expect to receive. It's about the various ways in which we are engaged in the community as a regional resource, and also to make sure that we're giving students the best possible quality education. That all costs money. And so what we don't want to do is to serve our students on the backs of their own financial resources. When I talk to students, one of the reasons, and it's a perfectly understandable reason, and it's at the forefront of students' minds, when I ask them, so why did you pick Eastern? They talk about the liberal arts, they talk about the community, they talk about the feeling they had when they came to an open house or an orientation. But the most important thing is affordability. That's the one connecting feature of every student's decision to come to Eastern. So in order for us to be affordable, we have to essentially secure resources from every means possible, whether it's philanthropy, whether it's donors, whether it's people who sort of want to give to the university, trying to bolster the support for grants and sponsored projects that provide resources to the campus to continue to deliver what we do, but most importantly, to work with the system and my peers, my peer presidents, to work with the legislator to ensure that we're able to give life to the needs of the institution and to serve our students. So it's complex. We know that we're going to go through a challenging period in about a year or two when the decline in the number of high school graduates will become more acute, but we're looking to think about other populations that maybe have been underrepresented in the way in which we deliver education to be part of the Eastern family. So that includes graduate students, online learners, it can include post-traditional students, part-time students, but we also want to emphasize that this is the public liberal arts institution of Connecticut and never lose sight of that.
Well, Dr. Karim Ismaili, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you for just giving us a moment of your time, as we say, just 90 days in, and certainly things continue to go well here at Eastern. It will be interesting to see whether or not you last 18 years as well. We're not trying to put the pressure on you, but as I say, Eastern is obviously in very good hands, and it's been a pleasure talking to you, and we look forward to updates and catching up with you, hopefully in a year's time to see where the situation is with obviously the school, but also with yourself. But in the meantime, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you very much, Brian.
And if you're interested in becoming a student at Eastern and taking one of their many majors or minors in the liberal arts, then head over to their website at easternct.edu. Connecticut East This Week is made possible by Media Here and Now is a full-service content creation agency based in Eastern Connecticut and producing video, audio, podcasts and digital content for social media, online and broadcast use for all types of businesses, organizations and nonprofits. If you need a new company video or radio advert or want to start your own podcast, then get in contact and see how we can help you at mediahereandnow.com. And
SCAD, the Southeastern Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence, is looking for licensed clinicians and is offering the top benefits packages in the state. Go to licensedclinicians.org to learn more. That's licensedclinicians.org.
Okay, antibodies, huddle up. We're a great team, but the flu is dominating. The good news is the human we're protecting just got his flu shots. That means all of us antibodies have strong new gear that will help us fight and defend against the flu. We must win so that our human can stay healthy and help protect the people he cares about most.
Let's work as a team to defend against the flu. Gear up with a flu shot to help protect yourself and others and reduce your risk of being sick or hospitalized with the flu. Learn more at getmyflushot.org. Brought to you by the AMA, CDC, and the Ad Council.
Time now for a look at other stories making the headlines this week. Local and state leaders, as well as residents of the City of New London, heard the latest update about the National Coast Guard Museum that will open on the city's waterfront in 2026. The museum has received almost $100 million in funding from the federal government, as well as from private donors and organizations, but still needs another $50 million to complete the project. Susan Curtin is the board chair of the National Coast Guard Museum Association and said their campaign for the remaining money is getting attention inside and outside of the country.
This project has garnered the support of an incredible 6,730 donors who together have made over 137,000 contributions. The commitment spans all 50 states, as well as Puerto Rico, Guam, Saipan, and countries abroad, including the UK, Norway, Germany, and Canada. Pretty incredible.
Matthew Pugliese is the Deputy Commissioner of the Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development and said the state, through former Governor Malloy and current Governor Lamont, has given $20 million to the project, but said the investment is about more than just the money.
We're really excited to see the impact that it's going to have here when it's open, not just the history and the service and the sacrifice that is represented here in the museum, also the vibrancy that it is going to create. When you see these beautiful images of this new facility, this new cultural and historic asset that New London, Connecticut is going to have on its waterfront.
Senator Chris Murphy has been a long-time long-time supporter of the museum, which has been years in the planning. Murphy said that's because of an old law that prohibited the Coast Guard, part of the Department of Homeland Security, from directly funding the museum themselves, which is why it's taken so much longer to find other ways to raise the money.
I have the fortune of being the chairman of the subcommittee that writes the checks for the Department of Homeland Security. I sought chairmanship of that committee because I knew that we had the chance to do something really special here. And I knew that if I was chairman of that committee overseeing the budget, we had a good chance to be able to close that funding gap and turn this from a dream into a reality. Because of that nearly $100 million federal investment, we are almost there.
The new 80,000 square foot museum will have 5 floors of interactive and immersive experiences, as well as state-of-the-art exhibits and more than 600 artifacts and 5,000 images, including STEM-based educational programs for schools and colleges. Once completed, it will also serve as the permanent home of the U.S. Coast Guard training ship Bark Eagle. Navy, state and federal officials celebrated the establishment of a new microgrid at the U.S. Navy subbase in New London recently. The project has cost over $250 million and provides the subbase with an enhanced ability to generate power for the entire base when required or if there is an outage on the public system. Captain Ken Curtin is the 53rd commanding officer of the subbase and said having a reliable power supply is essential to their mission.
We are excited to officially mark the completion of a more than decade-long initiative to ensure energy resilience here at Subbase. A microgrid is a self-contained electrical network, often of various interconnected energy distribution systems, that allows you to generate your own electricity on site and use it when you need it most, such as during the interruption of power from the public or commercial grid.
The new microgrid is made up of a combination of generators and fuel cells using natural gas that can be turned on if public power should go out, allowing the base to disconnect from the public supply and continue operations uninterrupted. Governor Lamont was the keynote speaker at the event and had a simple message about why this type of energy project is so important.
The lights can't go out at our Navy base. This is what this is all about. You know, whether it be more severe weather events or bad actors, the lights stay on at our Navy base. It's important for our security in the world. This part of the country is so important, EB down the way and Coast Guard and what the submarine fleet means in this region.
The subbase is the only military base to have a microgrid of this scale on the East Coast. US Congressman Joe Courtney has been honoured by the Government of Australia with one of its top civilian awards, the Order of Australia. Courtney joins a select group of US appointees to be given the award, which recognises extraordinary service to Australia by a non-citizen of the country. Courtney is a co-chair of the Friends of Australia caucus and says the award is not just about him, but for the region he serves as well.
I am greatly honoured, very excited because hopefully even in southeastern Connecticut, it's going to be kind of a noticeable event about how the connection between our state and Australia is actually pretty special. Right now, we've got Australian Navy officers going to sub school, shipyard workers that are going to be coming into Groton as well. So, I think it's going to be very noticeable in the coming months and years about the fact that sort of a destination point for a country that's just about as far away as you can get in the globe.
Courtney has been instrumental in the trilateral defence agreement called AUKUS between Australia, the UK and the US to help provide nuclear submarines to Australia, the first time the US has ever entered into such an agreement with another country.
Obviously, the announcement of the AUKUS decision in 2021 really turbocharged that whole sort of legislative push on Capitol Hill. So really, since, over the last 4 or 5 years with AUKUS, that relationship has intensified. And I've been over a number of times to visited some of their military installations, particularly out in Perth, where their Navy and submarine fleet is.
Courtney will receive his award at a celebration dinner in Washington, D.C. next month, organised by the Australian Embassy. That's all from us for this edition. Do send us your questions and story ideas to the show via our website at connecticut-east.com or Facebook or Twitter at Connecticut East and on Instagram at Connecticut East This Week. And you can listen to the show again on our social platforms, on demand, and by asking your smart speaker to play Connecticut East This Week podcast. And please like, follow, and share on your social media too. I'm Brian Scott Smith. Thank you for listening.